And this is what you find on anything. It's all brown. There's not a lot of green, of course, but I stopped mid-run because I thought these were so beautiful. The negative space they create up in the sky against the backdrop of the sky caught my eye. And then when I walked up close to them, they're just beautiful. I don't know, there's just something to me that's beautiful about them. And then a little further along, I was running past a grove of pine trees, conifers, and there was all this beautiful old pine, discarded again. These used to be green, and now they're not. They're good old brown. But there was something beautiful, and they still smell so good. So I picked up a bunch of those. And so this piece is, again, down here at the bottom, there's some fragmented pieces of paper. I didn't do anything to these except pick them up off of the table that they were on. Well, and I kind of brushed the edges with some ink just to give them a little definition. But I wanted to keep them in their pieces. These are all fragmented pieces. I'm not doing anything to them. I'm just gathering them as I find them, and they're just broken pieces. So, yeah, and then there's a couple pieces of sewing pattern here. That's what's on here. And they're just puzzle pieces. And what I wanted to do was look at how all of these pieces, these fragmented pieces that feel like they're kind of untethered out in the universe waiting to be found, feels like me. And I feel like in some ways I'm being reinvented, that we are constantly at work creating ourselves. God is constantly at work with us creating ourselves. And so there's this beautiful capacity to become and to continue to become. And I don't know that we're ever finished with that process. We just continue to become. So as I work on this piece, I'm thinking about becoming and how things are continuing to become. There's nothing coming up from the soil, but all of these pieces are going down into the soil, hopefully germinating in that ground. And something's going to come up here. I don't know what, but it's going to include all these broken pieces, and it's going to be something really beautiful. So that's kind of where I'm at, like artistically, spiritually, mentally. And in this book, The Sacred Enneagram, I think this little story that he tells kind of began to put me on that path. So I'm going to read you a little parable story. And hopefully you can see kind of where this takes us all. So this is from, it's called The King's Diamond. It's a traditional Jewish parable. And it illustrates, for all of us, no matter what type we are on the Enneagram. Okay, so I'm going to read this parable to you. Long ago lived a wealthy king whose fortune was unrivaled. He possessed valuable treasures from all known lands, including paintings and sculptures from the world's greatest artists. The legend of his prosperity was punctuated by his most prized possession, a precious diamond bigger than any that had ever been seen before. In fact, it was larger than the king's own hand, and nearly flawless in its color and clarity. When the king wasn't admiring it himself, the diamond was put on display for all his local subjects to admire. Protected by armed guards, of course, visitors from far and wide came to gaze upon its mythical beauty. As the king's fame grew and his kingdom flourished, he credited this very special diamond as the source of his prosperity. One afternoon, as the king gazed upon the diamond, holding the precious stone up to the sunlight, to his horror, he noticed a deep and long crack from the top of the stone to the very bottom. How could this have happened? He exclaimed, heartbroken with the devastating knowledge that it would be impossible to fix this terrible flaw. His court gathered around him with his most esteemed advisers, attempting to appease his fears. The best jewelers throughout his kingdom visited his throne room to examine the flawed diamond. After inspecting the crack, most were concerned that any attempt to work on the stone would cause further damage, splitting it into countless smaller stones. The only ones to offer solutions suggested cutting the diamond into 2 new gems, which would still be the largest in the land, but the king refused, holding on to an unrealistic hope. Finally, a poor elderly man arrived at the palace and asked if he could examine the stone. Initially, the king's guards thought he may be a homeless wanderer, but quickly learned he was a gifted lapidary whose engraving artistry was thought to be the best known to humanity. After scrutinizing the flawed diamond, this old man looked at the king and said, "Your Highness, I know what to do. I can fix this. Not only will I restore its beauty, but I will make it more valuable than you could even imagine." The king sat in disbelief, wondering about the audacity of this old man's claims. "Your Majesty, all I ask is that you let me do my work undisturbed, unmonitored. In 2 weeks' time, I will return your diamond to you. In the meantime, allow your patience and trust to give me the privacy I need to focus on my work." The king, concerned this might be a con, agreed, adding the condition that the elderly stonecutter must do his work in the palace. A room was prepared and guards appointed to keep watch over the old man's comings and goings. With that, the old man took the stone and began the slow, undramatic work of restoration. The king couldn't rest, obsessing over the future of his most prized possession. After 2 weeks, the old man let the guards know that he was finished with the work and would like to present the diamond to his king. The palace guards rushed to the king's throne room with the most anticipated news of the kingdom, and the court was assembled for the presentation. Standing before His Majesty, the elderly lapidary held up the diamond, wrapped in a dirty old polishing rag. He carefully pulled the stone from the cloth. There, engraved on the top of the diamond, was an exquisite flower, and the crack down the middle of the stone was its stem. The king was astonished. The diamond was actually more stunning than before, and more beautiful than anyone could have dreamed. And as I sat with that story and began the practice of centering prayer, which, let me explain that a little bit to you. In Chris's book, he talks about the contemplative life as being our means of finding our way back home. And I had heard of centering prayer. I'd actually studied it, attempted it, and it did not resonate with me the last few years. And I've read this book, which this is a great book. It's called Centering Prayer and Inner Awakening by Cynthia Bourgeault. And she talks all about centering prayer. She works with Richard Rohr in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in the Center for Action and Contemplation. So I had been familiar with this prayer, but it just never really, I tried it, but I didn't give it enough time. And then just finding that is a great way to find our way back home. I'm a 4 on the Enneagram, and so I'm a heart type. The 2, the 3, and the 4 are heart types. And Chris suggests centering prayer for the heart types. And so I began to do that. And I'm finding that in order to find my pieces and bring them all back home, to be a more whole person, I have to spend time hearing that, resting from being known and being seen, except by God. So centering prayer offers me a space where I can alone be seen, be known, be loved by God alone, and let that sink, like let it sit. And that's what centering prayer does. If you're interested in hearing more about centering prayer, will you contact me? I'd love to talk more about it. It's just one way of a gazillion ways of praying. But right now it's just really resonating for me. So I wanted to just take a minute and offer to you some of the things that I do. If you're interested in the Enneagram, the contemplative way of being with God, creative exploration or awakening, I am a spiritual director, I'm an artist, an author, a writer, and so every day my desire is to help others unlock some of the parts of themselves that have been hindered or injured or lost. And so some of the ways we do that are learning ways to connect with God. That's the most important. God comes with us in everything, whether we're on a creative process, whether we're in the stillness and silence, whether we're active, outwardly active, or innerly quiet. He is there. So my heart is that we can connect with God in all of those places. So visit me at flyforward.org and take a look and see what I do. And if any of those things resonate with you, please contact me, and we can have more dialogue around some of the ways that God is inviting us into being with Him. All right, see you next time. Thanks.